My name is Sjoerd de Jong, also known as Haurensis, and I started out with game development in 1999 by modding the original Unreal. From Unreal I moved on to modding an tournament. I created 24 standalone levels for that game, as well as several of its biggest mods, Excedia and Operation Apali. In 2003 it was that work that got me into the games industry. I started out with a small job for Streamline Studios, after which I was contracted by Epic Games to work on Anno Tournament 2004 as a level designer. I made 7 of the official levels, including the 2 demo levels Tolan and Rankin. After that contract, I was hired by Guerrilla Games and I worked on Shellshock NAM 67 for a year, and a bit on the first Killzone. I then moved on to Kaon Games, where I worked on the big Unreal Engine 2 MMORPG, The Chronicles of Spellborn, while in the meantime I wrote my 2 books, and I took on contracts for Digital Extreme, on the Unreal Engine 2 shooter Warpath, and for WebSen on the Unreal Engine 3 game Huxley. After all that, I was employed by Starbreeze, and I worked on Syndicate for a while, followed by the startup of my own company, Untitled Studios. At Untitled Studios, I directed and I worked on for Unreal Engine 3 game The Ball and the UDK game Unmechanical. While working for my own studio, I also took on a contract for Plastic Piranha, as well as for several other smaller clients. Plus all of that aside, I'm also responsible for large bits of Sweden's prime game development indication Future Games nowadays. I wrote my first tutorial sometime around 2002, and have over the years built out my website haurensis.com into a tutorial and training focused site. Unreal Engine 4 wise, I started working with it in March 2013, and I've been working on my own Unreal Engine 4 game Solus ever since. I'm currently also involved in the production of another 2 Unreal Engine 4 games as a consultant. All of that has led that I have 15 years experience in the Unreal Engine, and have done Unreal Engine related work for 17 different companies over the years. So in this Blueprint introduction video, we're first going to look over the basics of Blueprint, the basic concept, as well as a small introduction guide for people coming from Kismet, what are the key differences compared to Kismet in Unreal Engine 3. And after that we're going to move on by setting up a door. We have a door here in the level, and we're going to set that up. We're first going to set it up with just the level blueprint, so we're going to start very simple, and then later on we're going to move on by moving the door's functionality to a separate blueprint you can place anywhere in any level. Following that, we're going to set up a pressure plate as well, and we're going to connect the pressure plate to the door, and we're going to set up the fact that as a player you can locate and pick up and carry items, and then you can place the items on the pressure plate in order to keep the door open. So that's the basic setup of what we want to do. I'm going to start off with explaining Blueprint as a system, the basic functionality, the basic principle of it, and as well as information for people coming from Kismet in Unreal Engine 3. So Blueprint is a new visual scripting language and system in Unreal Engine 4. It's, I would say, also the most powerful new feature. It's perhaps also one of the most complex new features. So you can open it, and we can start very simple here. Just when you have this level loaded, the Solus Blueprint tutorial map, open Blueprint, open the level blueprint. So Blueprint, open level blueprint, you get this window, and then you can see Blueprint. So in the middle you have the event graph. You can see this is called the event graph. On the left side you have variables, which is this section over here. Then this is the details of whatever you have selected. So for example there, if you click on default scene route, that's the only variable you have, then you can see the properties of that thing here. The variables for people coming from Kismet are basically all the things you would have defined in here. They now show up in the list on the left. So you have a big list of all the variables, all the bools, all the floats, ints, and so on. On the right side we then have a favorite view. I don't personally use that much, so I'm just gonna drag it up like this, don't use it. And then there is a list with all possible, or actually it's not all, but most of the possible actions you can take. If you're new to it, however, I would advise against using this list over here and stick to right clicking and selecting things through this. You can see the right click menu is context sensitive, the list on the right is not. And the fact that the right click menu is context sensitive will make it easier for you to find the things you're looking for. So if you're new to it, I would actually just completely disregard the stuff on the right and just stick to this. Good, so the event graph is basically just the sequence from Kismet. So it's a big space where you work. can zoom in, it's just a big space to work in. If you right click, you can add blocks. So when you want to have something done in Blueprint, you first need to have an event. Something has to be able to start it. So everything is started through an event. Therefore, let's start with an event. So if I take event begin play, then that means the moment the level starts, therefore also the game. So the moment you can begin to play, execute this. And I can make a very basic script here. If I right click again and I type print, you will get print string. So if you add print string and you connect it to, just click and drag, then you have this. This is basically hello world. You can type literally hello world. There we go. If I were to now play the level, you can see on the top left it says hello world. So that's a very basic script. There's other things you can do. For example, you could move the player. So you can teleport the player basically. If you want to do that, you could say, first of all, you would need to have the player. So let's just type player pawn. If you type player pawn, you get the player pawn. So this is the player in the world that will be returned here. This is the player. And then you can do something to that player. Now you could try teleport, for example. And I'll just connect that there. Because this is going to execute right away, it might be difficult to see, but I'll fix it in a moment. And then you need to type where to teleport the player to. So I don't think 0, 0 is the best place to be, so let's find some other place. I'm just going to click, for example, the light here at the end of the corridor. And then on the right side in the details panel, we can see exactly where it's located. So I'm going to copy the location of that light. So basically I want to move the player to wherever the light is. So that seems to do fine. And then let's try. So I start playing from here. I press play and I expect to end up over there. And that's correct because I'm now in the corridor and I actually started from there. So that's a basic teleport script. And you can go on and on and on like this. I mean, you've seen people who have watched my Solus introduction videos. The stuff gets really, really big. I can briefly open up one of my scripts. And this isn't even the complete script. It's just a free one I released. It's a very small part of it. But you can go really far with it. There's a lot of functionality you can implement. Before we're going to go there though, before we're going to move on with the door, I first want to talk a bit about the general concept. So this is not about setting things up, it's more really about the concept. So first of all, a key difference compared to Kismet is that you can never have multiple events of the same type. So what you could have done in Kismet is, for example, you had event level loaded in Kismet, you could have added 50 event level loadeds and they would have all executed the moment the level would start. However, I can't do that here anymore. So if I would try to add another begin play, it automatically goes back to the first one. If I were to try to control paste this, the name goes really wrong. If I try to compile it, it's not going to like it. It's really going to complain about this. This is not going to work. I can try to copy paste this one as well. Control W is also copy. Control W is instantly duplicate basically. And also while we're at it with general tips, you can also easily just copy something and paste it in Notepad. So I opened up Notepad here and I pasted in Notepad and then you can see it in text format. If you would really want to, you could actually modify it here as well. It's quite difficult, but if you really want to fix something or reassign something, you could actually change it over here. For example, here it says hello, so let me just do this. Replace with AAA, and actually it still says hello, but if I were to find the right place, it would work. Anyhow, it's not really about editing it, but you can use Notepad to back things up. So for example, let's say this is a combination I commonly do. I could paste it to Notepad, save it on my hard drive somewhere, and every time I need this combination, I could just open up the text file and paste it back in. You can also use it to, for example, copy-paste scripts between levels. You would select everything in this level, copy it, open the other level, and paste it in. Or paste it in a text file, and then email the text file to a team member, and then he can paste it in, and so on. Anyway, back to the differences between Kismet and Blueprint. So this is not going to work, even though it doesn't complain when you compile. And blueprints, by the way, need to be compiled, so changes will not show up until you press compile. However, when you try to play, it would automatically compile the script as well. So this is not a good way to go. You can only have one of every event, and you can also have only one line, execution line, coming out of every event. If I try to do this, it actually disconnects the first one. That's a key difference as well. If you want to have multiple lines, what you need to do is add a sequence. You can add a sequence if you hold S. So hold the S key on the keyboard, and while holding it you click somewhere, and every time you click you get a sequence. You can add more connections to it if you want, and what basically a sequence is it simply splits up the signal. So if I do this, then the signal gets split up and it will instantly execute both at the same time. So as you might have seen in my own scripts, I tend to split it up a lot, and then it branches off in a lot of different directions and does a lot of different things. So that's one way to go. Then also everything is context sensitive. So as mentioned before, if you right click, it says context sensitive here. So the right click menu only shows what can be applied to the current thing you have selected or in the current situation you're in. The list on the right side, that shows everything, including things that are not relevant to what you're doing. For example, it says here online leaderboard, write leaderboard integer, or all kinds of things you don't really need right now. So the right click menu only shows what you can actually do, which helps a lot with figuring out what you can and can't do. Not only that, the right click menu is often the only way of getting to things you need. A lot of the things you need are not even in the list on the right side. And it's not just the right click menu that's context sensitive. There is a second menu that you get if you click and drag from something. If you click and drag from, for example, here, and you let go, you also get a menu. This menu in turn is context sensitive based on what the execution coming from this type of node can do. In fact, it's even more pronounced if you were to do that from variables, not really variables, but something like get player pawn. If I click and drag from here, I get a completely different menu than if I were to right click or click and drag from here. For example, if I were to look at variables, you can see here if you drag from get player pawn to variables, you can see things like camera, get base eye height, set base eye height. If I were to just right click and I go to variables, there is no camera here. If I were to go from here, again variables, there is no camera. So the right click menu and the menu that shows up when you just click and drag, that changes continuously. And a lot of things you need and you need to be able to get to will only show up if you click and drag on the right place. So absolutely make sure you click and drag from the right places. It will speed up things tremendously. Another key difference is that the mathematical operations and all kinds of similar operations happen outside the mainstream. So I'm going to set up quite an incorrect system here. I'm just going to copy a couple of things. I'm going to try to make it a bit more complicated just to prove the point. So I'll just copy it around some things. I'll do like that, or he teleports twice or whatever, and then he has the destination location. I'm going to do some more advanced things very quickly just to demonstrate it. So this is not meant for you to understand, but it's just to prove the point of how it goes non-linear. So sometimes you can't actually get to something by dragging from there. So this is a clear example of how it's often different. I want to have break vector. And here it doesn't do it because these outputs are on the right side. While I'm trying to click from the left side here, I mean, it gives different options. Either way, then we can make a vector again. I'm just doing random mathematical operations here just to prove the point. But you can see here, once you start doing all kinds of mathematical things, there are no execution pins on them anymore. So I have a very basic setup here that takes a vector, it breaks them into x, y, z separately, then it adds 500 to y, it combines it again to make a vector again, and then it goes in destination location. So it does some operations here. But there is no white line that goes in here. This is different from Kismet. In Kismet, it would have gone through, it would have executed that. Here, a lot of operations are entirely separate from the thing that actually uses it. So when this executes, how you have to look at this is that when the signal starts here, it goes through, it goes through, it goes through, it goes through, and then it reaches this block that has this all kinds of other stuff connected to it. Then the signal basically instantly teleports here. It goes through linearly, executing all these blocks in between, goes back to the end, and then it will tell the thing at the end, hey, I'm now done calculating all the stuff that was connected to you. We can now move forward. And then it executes to the next one, etc. So it's a bit non-linear. The line goes here, and then it will instantly go back there, go through this, and then it continues down the line. That's a key difference as well. That does take a little bit of time to get used to, but after a few weeks, this should go fairly natural for you. Other than that, as for basic concept, you can see this is an event graph. You can have multiple event graphs in the same way that you can have multiple sequences like in Kismet. So on the left side it says here add a new graph. I can add a second graph, and now I have two of them. If you double click them, you open up the next one. A graph is basically just a workspace. It gives you an empty large space to work in. So you can add as many graphs as you want, or there might be some kind of high limit, but you can add quite a few of them in case you need to separate your script or you try to organize things. I'll stick to the main one for now. Other than that, we have the variables on the left. As mentioned, you can easily add a variable if you press plus variable. Then you can type a name. And then down here you can set what it actually is. Kind of drops off the screen here, but you can set it to a float, for example, and then it's a float. You can click and drag this in, and then you can either get it or set it. So I'll get it, then I just get the value, or I set it and then I can assign a value to it. Right, so those are a couple of basics. There's a lot more basics to come later on while we actually build something, but now you have a basic understanding how this part works. Let's try to build a door.